Welcome everybody for coming. My name is Nicholas Anton. I'm the interim director of the Inter-Orthodox Ecumenical and Interfaith Relations Department of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. Because we had some questions about this during and after the first panel. On the schedule, it has the name of our department, but we're putting on this panel on bullying because our department is also responsible for issues related to church and society, the social issues. The reason for that is because when we work with other faiths, other Christians, usually the point of overlap is that we're able to sort of look past our differences and work together. So historically, they've always placed social issues under our department. So rather than have me and others stand up here and bore you with the details of what we do, we want to just feature the work that we do. And so we've brought great panelists. So just welcome, and I did want to also say that we wanted this to be a collaborative effort. So it's a synergistic effort with the Youth and Young Adult Department, the Religious Education Department, the Center for Family Care, and Internet Ministries. So I'll introduce Angeliki Konstantin, who is the Educational Ministry Specialist. She just changed, so that's why I haven't memorized the title yet. Of the Department of Religious Education for the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, and she will be the moderator, so that's the last you'll have to hear of me.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Do you remember the days of wedgies and wet willies and swirlies? How about the days of name-calling, body shaming, and spreading rumors? No matter what kind of bullying it was or where it happened, there was always a place where you could physically retreat to, where you could physically remove yourself from that situation. Now imagine that torment isn't happening at school, the playground isn't just happening at school, the playground, the altar, GOYA, or even at home. It is now happening 24/7, infiltrating even the most intimate of safe spaces. According to one study, Americans check their phones on an average of once every 12 minutes, about 80 times a day. Our phones have become an extension of our body. We bring our phones into every part of our life, which paves the way for the newest frontier of bullying. We know this, of course, as cyberbullying. The esteemed panelists before you will be discussing the topic of bullying from the academic, psychological, and practical perspectives in hopes of advising us and bringing awareness to this very important topic today. Our first speaker will be Rachel O'Blath. She studies applied human development at Boston University, where she is the manager of the Social Adjustment and Bullying Prevention Laboratory. Her research focuses on mental health service provision for children and adolescents with mental health challenges, and particularly those who experience bullying. In experiences that she can be used to inform tailored prevention and intervention programs. Rachel regularly presents at national conferences, including the American Educational Research Association, AERA, and the American Psychological Association, APA. She received a Glenn Doctoral Fellowship and a Boston University Women's Guild Award. In addition, her research has earned awards from the Massachusetts Psychological Association, MPA, and the American Psychological Foundation, APF. Without further ado, Rachel will be starting.
So hi, I'm Rachel. I am a fourth-year doctoral student just up the street at Boston University, right across from the Red Sox Stadium. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about bullying and cyberbullying from kind of the big picture lens, so some of the facts and the statistics around how prevalent it is and how much it takes place. And then Joanne and Christy are going to talk a little bit more about things that you can do on the ground in an applied way to sort of help with this issue. And so I'm the manager of the Social Adjustment and Bullying Prevention Laboratory at Boston University. So we do research looking at the short and long-term mental health impacts of bullying and peer victimization on the students who are involved. And we also evaluate bullying prevention and intervention programs to make sure that what's being put out there is evidence-based and that we know that it's effective. So when you sink money and resources into it and time, you know you're going to get something that has proven to be effective. So what is bullying? I think if you turn on the 24/7 news cycle for any length of time, you will see a story about bullying. There are a lot of TV shows that are being made about it and movies. So it's out there and it's talked about and not always in an accurate way. So just to kind of go back to the roots, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control in the United States, defines bullying as unwanted aggressive behavior that's done by a youth or a group of people, not a sibling and not a dating partner, that is repeated, so it's happening again and again, or it's likely to be repeated, and it involves an imbalance of power, which means that the target or whoever is experiencing that aggression can't defend themselves. They can't make the bullying stop. So they're really powerless in that situation. And this does happen between siblings and between dating partners. Those are sort of thought of as different constructs, but they're also really important. Today we're just kind of going to focus on what happens between peers. There are many different forms of bullying. Some of them are very stereotypical, and you probably knew about them when you were in school or saw people experience them or experienced them yourself, and some are not so stereotypical. So direct bullying are the ones we think of most often, so that's the physical bullying, the pushing, the hitting, the fighting. We have verbal bullying, which is teasing, name-calling, being made fun of. Threatening, which is like very typical. I always think of Calvin and Hobbes, like the bully Mo, like taking his lunch money or threatening him, if you don't do this, I'm going to beat you up. And sexual jokes and gestures, which we see a lot more frequently in middle school and high school. Right now there's a lot of homophobic bullying going on around like perceived sexual identity. And then we also have indirect bullying. So that are things that happen not necessarily in front of you or to your face, but you kind of know that they're going on, and they're unpleasant. So having rumors spread about you, so if we think stereotypically would be kind of the movie Mean Girls, if people have been exposed to that. Gossip, people saying not nice things about you when you're not there. And being generally socially excluded, so not being invited places regularly or being kind of actively excluded from other groups of students. There's also property theft and damage, and this kind of doesn't fit into one or the other character type very easily, but it's also an issue. And then we have the internet and the online bullying. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And that is tricky because it could be direct or it could be indirect. It can really be both. And like Angeliki said, it can happen when you're not there. It can happen when you are online. It can be happening when you're sitting at your table having dinner with your family, or when you're sitting in church on Sunday morning. It can be going on without your knowledge. And one comment may just be one comment, but if 100 people view it, is it repeated? Because it can have a repetitive effect on you if more people are seeing it or it's being circulated again and again and again. And so there are some really important differences between traditional bullying and cyberbullying that researchers are taking note of and starting to think about. There's a really large audience for cyberbullying. It used to be that if you were being bullied, the people that knew about it were the people that were there and maybe the people they told. But it wasn't something where you were bullied at school and then someone you knew at church might find out about it, whereas today that's possible. Anonymity, so the people that are doing the bullying are protected by anonymity potentially. The person who is being bullied doesn't know who's doing it, so who can they tell on? Like if they tell an adult, like who do they say is bothering them? And if you're an adult trying to help, how do you make it stop if you don't even know who's doing it to begin with? There's a lack of direct feedback. So one of the things we do know is that in many bullying situations, if there is another student there or an adult, the bully may see people kind of cringing, or like there may be people there that don't approve and may indicate that socially or not, verbally or non-verbally. But when you're writing it online from the comfort of your house or your backyard, there's no direct feedback to you on whether or not that's socially acceptable. So it's really easy for you to keep doing it when there's no risk in terms of approval. There's 24/7 access, so kids have their phones on them 100% of the time, which means they could be bullying each other from inside the classroom while class is going on. And I think upwards of 5th grade, a very large percentage of students have cell phones these days that have internet capabilities. So they have a lot of freedom to do this at all times, and there is low monitoring. It is almost always unsupervised. And this isn't because adults don't try to monitor it. Kids are very often 1 or 2 social media platforms ahead of their teachers and their parents, and so a lot of times as adults we don't know how to handle it because we don't know the platform they're using and where it's going on, and we can't easily see that it's taking place. The other thing that a lot of people don't know is that cyberbullying and traditional bullying very often co-occur. So if a student is being cyberbullied, it's very likely they're also being bullied in person too. These things are happening overlapping. So traditional bullying it's not dead, it still exists, and it's still a big part of the problem. Just a little bit about prevalence. So how many students are being bullied, how many students are aggressors. It's good to kind of have this in mind when we see these sensationalist pieces on the news that make it seem like every single student is being bullied and bullying. So we know that about 30% of students overall are involved in bullying, and about 13% of students will act as the aggressor. So this is about 1 in 10 kids is acting as an aggressor at some point during their childhood in a repeated way. About 1 in 10 kids also is experiencing bullying as a target. And the really important thing to note is that a lot of kids are both. It's not this dichotomous, you're a bully or you're a victim, bully's bad, victim's good. Many kids are participating in both aspects and both sides of this. And so it's really important when we think about prevention and intervention that we have things that are really responsive to that. So in the past, there's been there was a big movement to kind of get up in front of kids and say, don't bully, it hurts, it would hurt your feelings. And the people that bully are really bad. And it's really not responsive to the sort of experience the kids are having where they're finding themselves socially and they may be experimenting with bullying because they think it'll help them stop being bullied, or they may be targets and they may be striking back, or striking back at less powerful kids to kind of get a feeling of control. So I think it's really important to consider that both the aggressors and the targets need our help in similar and different ways, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But it's also really important to note that in 80% of bullying incidents, and this is traditional bullying, bystanders are there. So it means other kids are seeing this going on. And that's not good because there are negative impacts for those kids too that I'm going to talk about. So we also need to be worried about the kids that are seeing this repeatedly, who may not even be involved in it, but they're witnessing it. The big question I always get, is bullying more common? We definitely hear a lot more about it on the news than we did when I was a kid, probably when some of you were kids. There's been about 25 years of research on bullying, looking at the prevalence of this issue. And overall, there's actually been a small decline in bullying in the US and also in the entire world. So this isn't becoming more common than it used to be, but it is changing. So while it's not more common, the face of it is changing because of cyberbullying and because of this 24/7 access to platforms. There are mixed findings on the changes in rates of online harassment. So we have some studies telling us it's going up and other studies telling us it's going down. And this is really a function of the fact that it is hard to figure out where kids are bullying each other online, besides asking them directly, which has pros and cons, but it's not always super accurate. But it's hard for us to get an accurate read on whether or not online harassment in general is going up or down. But it looks like it's kind of staying the same for the past 5 or so years, even with the development of new social media platforms and new opportunities, that kids are kind of moving from one platform to the other. And it's not that, oh, all these things are available, so kids are like, ooh, we can do this terrible thing to one another. It's more the kids that are having these issues are finding new outlets for it, but the same number of kids are really having these issues as had it before. And And another important thing to note is when we just look at like the number of incidents that are happening, traditional bullying is twice as common as cyberbullying. So if we just think about the number of incidents that are happening, there are a lot of things that are happening on the ground, usually when teachers or adults are around in the vicinity, that are possibilities for intervention. So it's not this sort of thing that is only going on in a space that we can't access as adults. I just want to talk very briefly about some of the mental health impacts of bullying, and I know that Christy and Joanne are going to talk about this a little more, but in general, we know that targets are more prone to things like depression and anxiety, health complaints, so constant complaining of stomach ache or headaches, kind of psychosomatic issues. They're also less likely to go to school, which makes sense if you think about it. If you're getting harassed at school, you're probably going to try to avoid it, and you're not going to participate as much. You're not going to raise your hand and risk answering a question if that's going to potentially be something that is used against you later. And we also know that youth that are involved in bullying as targets are at greater risk for experiencing dating violence. So with their significant others, they're more likely to experience different forms of harassment there. Aggressors, there's also a lot of things that aggressors of bullying are at risk for related to the aggression. They are much more likely to be depressed than their peers. They are much more likely to use substances, participate in early or risky sexual activity. They're much more likely to drop out of school. And again, they're more likely to be involved in dating violence, both as an aggressor and a perpetrator there too. So it is putting them at risk as well. And these are definitely kids that need our help also. There's also a lot of negative mental health impacts for the witnesses. So these are the people that aren't necessarily even participating. So people that witness bullying regularly are more likely to be depressed or anxious, more likely to use substances, and also more likely to be absent from school. And again, it makes sense. If what you're seeing at school is scary or difficult, you're not going to want to go there. You don't feel safe there. Really important to note that youth who are targets and aggressors, we call them bully victims. The ones who are participating in both are the ones that are the greatest risk for all these things. So these are the kids that have the worst long-term outcomes, the worst short-term outcomes in school. So it's really important that we really reach out to these kids in an effective way. And I'm going to give some tips how, and then I know Christy and Joanne are going to talk more about how they do this on a ground level. And I also really want to get it out there because of everything that goes on in the news. Suicide is a really complex issue, youth suicide, and there are multiple factors that contribute to it. Bullying is one of them. So students who are bullied or who are involved in bullying in any way as a target or aggressor are more likely to think about and attempt suicide. But we don't want to say that bullying is the sole cause of suicide. That spins it in a way that isn't necessarily true, and there are very often other things going on in addition to the bullying that are contributing to this. So how can we support youth? And I want to say, I think from a church perspective, the church is in a really good position to be providing support to youth because especially if they're being bullied in school, this is potentially a place that is a safe environment. Teachers do a lot of bullying prevention, but we all know that teachers are overworked and they're also trying to prep kids for standardized testing and trying to kind of be a school nurse and already kind of trying to be a psychotherapist. So teachers are really busy and they are doing absolute best that they can. But in church, I think that is a place where we talk to kids about the kind of people we want to be and what makes a good friend and how to be a good family member. And so I think this is a place where there's really a lot of leverage to kind of make it a safe place for kids and talk to kids about conflict resolution and these sort of social issues that they face. So I think it's great that everybody's talking about this, and I think there's just a really unique position here that is not as often used or utilized as kind of the school direction. But in general, we can help youth build relationships with caring and responsive adults. And this is shown to be a protective factor in research for targets of bullying, having caring and responsive adults around them who interact with them. buffers the negative effects of bullying. So it makes it less likely that they'll experience depression, anxiety, potentially attempt suicide. For aggressors as well, exposure to positive role models for kids that are doing the bullying buffers the negative impacts for them, and it also makes them less likely to bully in the future. So really basic things that I think most of you are probably already doing in the setting that you work in. It's also really important to cultivate a positive social climate with really safe and positive norms about how we treat other people. And again, I think that is a place where churches have excelled, where schools have not always. But it's a great time to teach social problem-solving skills. So we know that both targets and aggressors of bullying tend to have deficits in their social problem-solving skills. So it means when they have a disagreement with a person, they don't necessarily know how to handle that conflict. And so if you can role model those tools and also talk directly about it with them, what do you do when you're angry at someone instead of hit them or instead of talk about them behind their back? As adults, we deal with social disagreements as well all the time, and hopefully most of us have learned better ways to cope, and so we can share those with the kids in a really explicit way. We can also create a space where youth can form really high quality friendships that will last a long time. And that, again, having social support, even if you're bullied, if you have good friends in addition to that, you are less likely to experience depression and anxiety. And same for kids that are doing the bullying. If they have high quality friendships, they are less likely to, say, use substances or participate in some of the risky activities we associate with being a teenager, and they're less likely to bully in the future. So it has a really positive effect on them. And also, and I know Christy's going to talk more about it, so I'm just going to say it really briefly, but know how to recognize the signs of youth that are in distress or danger. And the biggest warning sign is a drastic change in behavior. So if a kid becomes suddenly super aggressive, or a very outgoing kid becomes really, really quiet, or a really, really quiet kid becomes really, really loud, that could mean that something's wrong. And it may not be bullying, it may be some other issue or mental health problem, but it's good to know the signs of youth in distress. And just in general, it's nice to find out where to refer youth or families if they need more help than you can give. So if you're a Sunday school teacher, maybe that means knowing to talk to the priest, or if you're a father and you're not really sure how to handle a specific situation, just having a sense of what's available in the community so that you can point people in a positive direction. Because if you just tell them to go to the hospital or go to a doctor, they may or may not do it, but if you have a phone number for them to call, it's a lot more likely that they're going to reach out. And I just want to say thank you. I was really excited to be here today, and feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions.
Rachel, thank you so much for breaking down the different forms of bullying, as well as explaining the many issues that have been caused by it. I just want to say welcome to all the newcomers who've come into the room, and just let you know that there will be a time at the end to ask questions, and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session at the end, so just hold your questions till then. Our next speaker is Joanne Kazis. Joanne is a Boston native and a Boston Public School graduate who went on to earn a bachelor's degree in art and English with a concentration in communications from UMass Boston. She realized she was at her happiest when volunteering her time with children, which prompted her to then go on later and receive a master's degree in elementary education and creative arts and learning from Lesley University. Joanne has taught elementary school for 16 years in Newton, Massachusetts. She has completed several courses through Mindful Schools and is currently enrolled in the Mindful Schools year-long certification program to become a Mindful Schools certified teacher. She is also in IDEA's Initiatives for Developing Equality and Achievement for Students instructor for several years, facilitating graduate-level courses to educators and administrators on diversity, social justice, anti-bias, anti-racist teaching practices to help all students succeed. Joanne is an active member of the St. Ignatius Church in Rosendale, Massachusetts, her childhood parish. She is the director of youth ministry programs, co-teaches Sunday school to middle and high school teens, and serves as secretary on the parish council, and is also a member of WILS, Women in Leadership and Service at the parish.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. to kind of learn about this very important topic. I know that teaching public school 5 days a week for 180 days is a little bit different than having like a Sunday school class or a GOYA youth group once a week. But my hope is that something that we say here inspires you to take back to your churches, or maybe a strategy or an approach that you could use. Because again, we are not immune in the Orthodox Church of these issues and problems, and sometimes they do happen in our own. I know Rachel said that it's a great place to like escape bullying, but sometimes it could happen within our own communities as well. So it's really important to know the signs and the things that could be done. So things to keep in mind when doing any of this kind of work is that building a classroom community, or community in general, in a church community, is very, very important. Learning names. I know everybody thinks they know each other, but learning names and making sure that you're saying the names accurately is a very important, a small step we can do. In a classroom setting in my 5th grade, in my school, we have this responsive classroom approach, and then every morning starts with a morning meeting where kids hear their name and are greeted, because the worst thing in the world that you can do is go among your school day without even being greeted in a positive way. So we get to know each other, and we have activities and icebreakers. We co-create classroom rules, which is something we can do we've done in our GOYA community, and the kids really feel ownership instead of us saying, this is how we're going to act, right? So we talk about how we can be kind of community members together. I explicitly teach my students how to work together. That's not something that you just are born with knowing, right? We do a lot of team building activities and talk a lot about what a good community team member is. A lot of conflict resolution modeling, using I statements, and really thinking about how to communicate what we're feeling to each other. And then I teach a lot of lessons around kindness and empathy and growth mindset, which is Carol Dweck's work about we're here to kind of try new things, take risks, and mistakes are proof that you're trying. And then a lot through, like Anagiriki said, I do a lot with social emotional learning, and then respect for human differences. And then this is basically our faith disguised as, like in a secular setting, kindness, empathy, and things like this. In Massachusetts, and along with a lot of other states, has been legislation and laws passed that bullying is against the law now, and reporting is very important, and it's taken seriously. And so in our district, we have a curriculum called How to Bully Proof Your Classroom. It's through a responsive classroom organization approach. We are a responsive school. So in a responsive classroom, the core belief is that in order to be successful inside and outside of school, students need to have certain competencies, social and emotional competencies. We call them CARES, so cooperation, assertiveness, responsibility, empathy and self-control, as well as academic competencies, which include perseverance, academic mindset, learning strategies, and academic behaviors. So it's a very proactive approach. And I like to say that the relationship building is really key, because it doesn't matter how skilled of a teacher I am or how wonderful our curriculum is. If a child does not feel safe, respected, seen, and part of the community, then he or she or they will not learn anything that you have to offer them, and they just will not be able to access the curriculum. So building those relationships are really key. So one thing that I also do, so it's not just like it's very integrated of how I approach this. So the cycle of oppression is a key learning. And again, it doesn't happen day one. It's a very gradual progression. I do a lot in the younger grades with picture books. I brought some picture books in the back for you to see. We've done it a lot in our church, that we bring in books like this that are secular, but then we overlay scripture on top and teachings of the church. So that's something that you could definitely do in your own communities as well. But basically the cycle of oppression happens when we learn stereotypes, bias, history, and misinformation, and we don't learn missing history, right? So then learning then is reinforced by people in our lives who are well-meaning most of the time, and sometimes no, and not. But parents, family, neighbors, schools, teachers, and students pass along our implicit biases and our stereotypes to the younger generation, and places of worship are not immune too of passing along these ideas. And then we teach our stereotypes and different forms of bias, and then the cycle can keep going, but then the kids immediately see that there's another arrow there, and we talk about, well, we can interrupt the cycle. So we do a lot of work around breaking the cycle or stepping off the cycle by being an ally, and we do a lot of work around what does that mean to be an ally, to stand up for other people, as Jesus also directs us to do. So what is bullying? Our definition of bullying is very in line with what Rachel has presented. So it's unwanted aggressive behavior that includes an imbalance of power, and that kids who bully use their physical strength, of course, but then access to embarrassing information or popularity. We have a lot of instances, when kids are really good, call them BFFs or best friends in the younger grades, and then they get into kind of like the upper elementary in their teen or tween years, and they are like not friends anymore. So they have this access to this information about the other kid, and they could use that as leverage to kind of make their lives basically miserable. So, and then power imbalances can change over time in different situations, like Rachel said, even if they involve the same people. So a person who exhibits bullying behavior could also be the target of bullying, and it could change throughout the years or the grade levels, or even moment to moment. And then repetition, of course, bullying behaviors happen more than once. We have to make sure that in our school our students are clear, because sometimes kids overgeneralize, and families too, that if there's a conflict or a disagreement, that's immediately they jump to, my child is being bullied. So we want to tease that out, because it is important to make that distinction. So I do a lot with picture books, like I said, and language is really important to me, and I'm very cognizant of like what language I use and what I say to students, and that mindfulness piece kind of taking a pause. So when the bullying curriculums use language, they usually offer the bystander. So they say that there's the bully, there's the victim, but then there's this bystander, and that kind of keeps us a little bit, gives us an out, and gives us almost, it's not as serious sounding, because how often do we see things on the news or things happening within our own communities in our church? We're like, well, I'm not that person, I'm a good person, I don't do those things. So in this book, the narrator is this bystander who sees things happening to in her community, in her school community, and she keeps saying, well, I don't do those things, and she feels really sorry for the victims and things like this. But then something happens one day that shows that her being a silent bystander isn't enough. So I use different languaging with my students to really get them kind of fired up almost. Like 4th and 5th graders are really into like fairness and sticking up for people, so this really resonates with them. So some bullying curriculums have also introduced upstander, and I don't use any of these terms. What I like to use is something called the 4 boxes activity. So the kids are presented with these 4 boxes after the picture book, and we talk about active and passive, and we talk about bullying behavior and behavior of an ally instead of the bully and the ally, only because sometimes we're in that situation that we could be exhibiting some mean behavior, and no one wants to label themselves a bully. So I've changed the language of even like the subject topic. So and we go through and we talk about, well, what is some bullying behavior that you've seen, or what is in, we also use the book. So if kids can't sometimes talk about their own experiences, they can talk about the characters in the book. So that's a more of a safer, low risk way of talking about it. So they go through and they say, well, active bullying behavior could be anything that includes hitting or physical, name calling and teasing. That could go for anything about the person, whether it's their appearance or their family structure or their beliefs or their learning style, and then stopping a person from being or having friends, and that could include starting rumors about a person, telling other students not to socialize or play, or be friends with that person. And then when we talk about the behavior of an ally that's active, standing up and telling the aggressor to stop, encouraging other kids to be allies, to be supportive. There's strength in numbers. Getting the help of an adult, telling an adult at school or at home about what's happening. We differentiate a lot with the younger kids. Tattling is not the same as reporting, right? So that's the kids overgeneralize that as well. No, I can't say anything because that'll be tattling. Say something kind of supportive to the target of the bullying. So we don't. I also tell my students that you don't have to get in harm's way, but there are some things that you can do. Even just offering a kind word can be really, really empowering. And invite the student who is being bullied to walk, sit, or socialize with you. And then we go on to what is considered passive bullying behavior. And so oftentimes we know laughing along, even though you're not kind of condoning the behavior, nervousness sets in and you're anxious as well, and then you can maybe laugh along. Silently watching, like the character in the book, walking away from the situation, feeling sorry for the person being bullied but not saying anything to help them feel better, not telling an adult what happened and thinking that reporting is the same thing as tattling. And then this is blank, and it takes a while for the kids to get to this, that there is no such thing as a passive ally. You're either a part of the solution, taking some action, or you're part of the problem. And then I have to thankfully report that in years, I've been doing this for years, and in recent years this comes up, they come to the realization really quickly, and there's always one kid that says, passive ally doesn't make any sense. That's like a oxymoron. You can't be passive and do something. And then one thing here, I guess I don't have it here, but the kids also, have included cyberbullying, of course. I just didn't make it onto the slide. And then also, we also here say that, and it's a harder thing for kids to grasp, but they finally do get it, that the person that's exhibiting the bullying behavior also needs help. So if we're not reporting, then both the victim and the person exhibiting the bully behavior are not getting the strategies and the help that they need, because there's some lagging skill or something going on with that person as well. So why do this work? Well, we hear reports from actual children and young adults and adolescents and adults as well of they don't really care what words we use. They just want us to speak up and make the teasing stop, because oftentimes it feels very isolating and very alone, and that's when people can fall into a lot of these mental health issues of depression and isolation. And then also, this is a quote from Tom Harnett, who's a civil rights attorney, one person speaking up makes more noise than 1,000 people who remain silent. So another kind of lesson I try to teach the kids or really make them understand is that you don't have to be friends with the person to stand up for them. If you see something happening on the playground or at the bus stop or any kind of place where all these any events could happen, that they could stand up, and it doesn't matter if they know the person or not. And then this is my favorite, and the kids get a kick out of this. It's an African proverb. If you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping in a room with a mosquito. So we can all do our part. It is everybody's responsibility, right? And then also, Jesus basically tells us to, right? So my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. And then love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, of course. So everybody kind of is, very proud that we're good Christians. And also to love your neighbor as yourself. And most of the time, the person that's the most difficult is the one that needs the most love from us. So thank you all for being here, and I thank you for all the work that you do in your own communities with the youth of the church. So.
Thank you, Joanne, for bringing the perspective of a teacher and sharing the important tools that can help us fight against bullying. Our next speaker will be Christy Buck. Christy Buck is a Michigan State graduate and is the executive director of the Mental Health Foundation of West Michigan. With 31 years of experience in her field, her passion for transforming and saving lives through mental health and education led her to develop 2 classroom programs, Live, Laugh, Love, and Be Nice. She and her staff have passionately presented for over 200,000 people in West Michigan on mental health awareness, bullying, and suicide prevention. In addition, she is certified in mental health first aid and has been recognized as one of the top 100 in the country. Christy serves on the Granville School Board and is involved with the community organizations and coalitions that has served as the GOYA advisor and has served as a GOYA advisor and religious education instructor for 30 years at her parish. Christy is a recipient of numerous awards, including the 2012 Granville Distinguished Person of the Year Award, the 2014 Peacemaker Award from the Dispute Resolution Center of West Michigan, the 2015 Greek Orthodox Metropolis Exemplary Service Award, and the 2017 Hometown Hero from the American Red Cross, and the 2017 Athena finalist, the 2017 Art Van Charity of Hope Award, and most recently 2018's 50 Most Influential Women in West Michigan. Christy and her husband Tim are the proud parents of 3 amazing children, Dimitrios, Katerina, and Isabella.
But I'm really excited to be here today to share with you some extremely compelling information that goes beyond bullying. So am I clicking? Am I right? Nick, you'll have to tell me. So part of my job is I am the executive director of an organization called the Mental Health Foundation of West Michigan. And I like this pyramid because I think with anything, if you have no knowledge about something, then you have no confidence to take action. So that even goes along with kids when they're recognizing about something that we talk about a lot, and that would be bullying. If kids don't have knowledge about it, they will not have the confidence and take action. So I love that. So some of the programs we offer, and it was mentioned in my bio, we created Be Nice, which that's what I'm going to take you through. It's an action plan, and I think it's going to be a great way to leave today remembering some tips that I'm going to give you. In addition, another program called Live, Laugh, Love. Mental Health First Aid is actually a national 8-hour first aid program, and this was brought to the United States following the incident in Sandy Hook. So we recognized a need to get more awareness out there, and mental health first aid would just be a great class that I would suggest people take. In addition, we do tons of community events and then presentations and engagements. So today, I am going to be leaving you all at around 10:30 when we're done, and I'm attending a parade in this town where Be Nice is extremely evident amongst community members and the entire city. So we're guests of honor. So the goals really are about mental health awareness, and we need to be talking about this. We need to be talking about the onset of a mental health disorder, how I can actually help somebody that at the onset as opposed to when they might be in danger to themselves or others. So what is Be Nice? Be Nice is a mental health education, bully, and suicide prevention action plan that, such as Joanne was talking earlier, it's about and Rachel, creating positive cultural changes. So the program has been recognized throughout West Michigan as a program that does that. So it is an action plan, and actually the picture that you're seeing on the screen is a day that was commemorating this initiative, and we had one school district get super creative in having their buses all lined up to form the word Be Nice. And this is seen all throughout West Michigan. We're in 155 schools along with 50 businesses. So it is not just for schools, it's also for churches, communities, and businesses. So most lately, we've actually developed a church module where a priest can talk about mental health in sermonettes or in presentations. So be the one to know bullying in relationship to mental health. And what we do know is that children who are bullied are more than likely than other kids to be depressed, lonely, anxious, have low self-esteem, feel unwell, and indeed think about suicide. So it directly affects how somebody is thinking, acting, and feeling. Very sadly, a victim of bullying is twice as likely to take his or her own life compared to someone who is not a victim. So I want you all to be the one that knows facts. So mental health disorders affect 1 in 5 people. Serious emotional disturbances, approximately 1 in 10. About 80% of kids will never receive treatment, and why that is because stigma, because we might dismiss the behavior as something that I might blow off as being typical teenage behavior, typical adolescent behavior. This is why we need to get information into people's hands to understand the onset of a mental health disorder. Half of all mental health disorders begin by the age of 14 and 3/4 by the age of 24. So we have this amazing window of opportunity to help kids get help, help other kids, help kids. And then in addition, really take it seriously when our kids leave home and go off to college. Can I be able to recognize if my child, my grandchild, my goddaughter, godson is actually struggling while they're away from home? Suicide, yes, unfortunately, is the second leading cause of death amongst 10 to 14-year-olds, high school and college students, the 10th leading cause of death amongst adults. Bullying victims are 2 to 9 times more likely to consider suicide, and 9 out of 10 times when someone dies by suicide, they have the risk factor of depression and or other mental health disorders. So this is why it's so important. This is why the rate of suicide could be taken down if we talk about mental health, if we talk more about depression, if we take seriously that anxiety can lead to depression. Mental illnesses left untreated may lead to school failure. Yes, substance abuse, possible suicide. Fewer than 10% of schools in America have comprehensive mental health curriculums. And when I talk about that, I talk about this being really dissecting the illness called depression, and for kids, parents, and everyone to know what depression can look like before it gets so bad that somebody might be thinking of taking their life or taking the lives of others. The best thing about depression and about any mental health disorder is that early diagnosis and treatment results in accelerated recovery. And this is a brain disease. And just like any disease, if I get help at the onset, then maybe my loved one can get better. So be the one who knows what is a mental illness. A mental health disorder or illness is diagnosable when it affects a person's thinking, acting, feeling for 2 weeks or longer. And what I like to look at is I like to think that, are they able to go to work, attend school? Are they able to carry out daily activities? And are they engaging in satisfying relationships? And when I put that into context, those are the biggest things that I can start to be a detective if this is indeed somebody that I should move in and help them, invite myself to help them get help. A big realization about how disabling mental illnesses is, according to the World Health Organization, the disability from severe depression. And when I talk about the ability to work, attend school, carry out daily activities, engage in satisfying relationships. So the disability from severe depression is comparable to the disability from quadriplegia. And sometimes people look at me and they say, Christy, there's no way that can be. Yes, because if you put it into the context, if somebody cannot go to work because they can hardly get out of bed, they can't do their homework, they can't call their friends, they can't go exercise, they don't want to get up out of bed, that is disabling. So I'm going to introduce you today. So that's something I am super proud of. I am the founder of this action plan. And like I said earlier, it's all over West Michigan. And in fact, this year, just 2 months ago, we launched the initiative in Houston, Texas, to go along with one of their programs called Safe School Institute. So the 4 steps are to notice, to invite, to challenge, and to empower. So first and foremost, when I practice my N, I want to notice what is right and what is good. I want to seriously do that, because if I know what is right and good about people, about children, about my own children, then I'm going to have the ability to notice what is different. And this is why it's so important, and how I'm proud of Be Nice, because it's kind of geeky in that way to go out and be nice. And that is, I'm going to recognize the strengths. So every Sunday when I teach my religious ed class, I teach the middle school students, we start every lesson off with noticing what is right and what is good about each other. Because in fact, as a Sunday school class, we can even move forward to notice what is different about my other classmates. So when I'm looking for what is different, I'm looking for changes in somebody's mood or behavior. So I'm looking for familiarizing myself with what are some signs and symptoms of depression, what are some risk factors for depression and stress. I'm going to be the detective. I'm going to notice. So what am I looking for in noticing signs and symptoms of depression? It can come about in 3 different ways, and one is huge. It can come about physically. So someone could be experiencing fatigue, lack of energy, sleeping too much, too little, eating too much, eating too little. Things like constipation are affected by depression and anxiety, weight loss, weight gain. The change in my hygiene, when I'm beginning to look unkempt, is one of the first and foremost signs. And a lot of times that's where it leads kids to even bullying, because, oh, so-and-so's hair is so greasy. Oh, so-and-so has so much acne. Oh, so-and-so doesn't know how to dress. Oh, so-and-so smells so bad. Those can be some of the first signs that somebody might have the inability to even take care of themselves. Irregular menstrual cycles can be affected, headaches, so aches and pains. So many times what we know about the physical signs and symptoms, that might take the person to go to a doctor. So that is part of understanding that the doctors play an important role in this also. Behaviorally, I might see crying spells, withdrawing from others, neglecting responsibilities. So responsibilities could be doing my homework, going to practice, going to Greek dance practice, going to GOYA outings, a host of things. Loss of interest in my personal appearance, loss of motivation, slow movement, and this is where we see an increase in use of drugs and alcohol. I really want to stress that drinking should not be part of growing up. It shouldn't be, especially here in the United States. That can be the gateway into many other drugs and alcohol. We know that kids who utilize alcohol by the age of 14, where they are drinking, they have approximately a 77% chance of becoming an adult alcoholic. So we owe it to our kids to really enforce that drinking should not be allowed. I'm looking also for some psychological changes, and these come in the way of sadness, anxiety, guilt, anger, mood swings, lack of emotional responsiveness, feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, and irritability. So how I might see these things are through when they're frequently self-criticizing themselves, when they're blaming themselves, constant pessimism, impaired memory, no concentration, indecisiveness and confusion. This is making the littlest of decisions all of a sudden become extremely difficult for them. And many times when kids have attempted suicide, they will, and adults, they will report that what was behind it was the inability to find a solution for an ongoing problem. So we need to pay attention. Is this a situation where they are perseverating on it and they're looking for answers from me? Can I help them to look then at possibly physical changes and also behavioral changes? Again, with psychological thinking, oftentimes they think that other people see them in a negative light because they are so negative. They're so negative about themselves. And unfortunately, many times with depression and anxiety, the person might already have those personality traits. So now I've got to be even more of a detective of really listening very carefully in their conversations of possible hopelessness and worthlessness. And at this point, psychologically, this is where they might have thoughts of death and suicide. So what am I looking for in risk factors that might bring about a change in behavior? So we know that there's a chemical imbalance. We know that there usually is a decrease of serotonin and dopamine. It's really important for people to understand that this is a biological illness. They may have had a biological relative who also struggles with this illness. A lot of times, because we don't talk about this, we might not know about it, and this is why we have to increase awareness. It may be a learned behavior. So in my own home, I may be brought up by someone who struggles, and just how they behave might bring about my behavior. Being a woman puts me more at risk for depression. Stressful events, abuse, and trauma are probably the biggest risk factor in this whole piece of the pie, especially with kids. Having certain personality traits, so having low self-esteem, overly dependent, self-critical, pessimistic, those are risk factors. Using drugs and alcohol. A brain injury / concussion puts me at risk. Lack of involvement activities, which would put me in a position where I'm not around people and I'm more apt to isolate myself. And then ongoing stress and anxiety, which include school workload, learning disabilities, poor academic performance. balancing all of my academics, outside activities, and social life, having few friends or personal relationships, relationship drama, and I'll include in that having boyfriends, having girlfriends just puts you more at risk. Family conflicts, divorce, single parent households, siblings that are moved out of the home, siblings that may be in trouble themselves can bring about stress in the home, language barriers, moving, changing schools, new classroom and teachers, and this is where I should be on alert, helping my child. It doesn't mean I have to take my child to a doctor and put them on medications immediately, but all of these things are the things that I need to be aware and looking for the onset of a mental illness and possibly depression and anxiety. And then most of all, that last one is what we've been talking about, a stressor known as bullying. So all of these things, just like Rachel said, bullying isn't the only contributing factor to people feeling depressed or people possibly considering suicide. All of these other things can put someone at risk to have depression, which again, 9 out of 10 times when somebody does take their life, they have an illness called depression and or another mental health disorder. So I love my action plan as we get going. The invite is to invite myself to notice and understand mental health. This is a real quick presentation today. I hope at some point we can do this again, maybe at another Clergy-Laity, and bring more information, because usually this is about an hour presentation. Invite yourself to make a change. Inviting takes a risk in reaching out, and that also includes kids. Talk and listen with kids every day, spend time at church, school outings, watching what is going on, taking a stop in to see, is my child telling me that they are bullied and is this actually happening? And is it having an effect on how they think, act, feel? Be a good example of kindness and leadership, learn the signs of bullying and depression. How do I start a conversation? First, I begin by telling the person that I'm very concerned about what's going on. Tell them specifically, what have you said and done that is bringing me to bring this concern to you? I've noticed that. I've noticed you're not doing your homework. I noticed you have stomach aches every day. I notice you're crying a lot. I notice that you're being more critical about yourself. I notice that you're unable to make a decision. What is going on? Have you ever felt this way before? How long have you been feeling this way? Have you ever talked to anyone about this before? Those 3 things give me the clues that maybe it's been going on for 2 weeks or longer. Maybe they have not talked to anyone about this before, and maybe that's a time for them to talk to someone. And has there ever been anything that's helped you in the past? And that gives me the clue that possibly that person has some self-awareness about their feelings, and also that they're able to identify some protective factors in themselves. Challenge myself to take action, challenge myself to create healthy habits early, be proactive bystanders, help my school, my church, my youth group address bullying and the effect on mental health, establish rules about how people are treated, challenge others, challenge stigma, challenge myself to take action, make sure my child is safe, talk and listen to your child, collect evidence of what is going on. If it is happening online, print this out, take screenshots, have it as evidence to take to the school, work with my school or church, refrain from contacting the parents of the bully. Again, I cannot reiterate more to everybody that you should take it seriously and report the incidents, but most of all, take care of your child. Contact the content provider, contact the police when physical threats are involved. If the bullying is based on race, sex, disability, contact the Office of Civil Rights. And I am serious in these things because there are many mechanisms of a way to report. This is not acceptable for kids to be bullied online. It is against the law. Seek counseling, implement measures to prevent it from reoccurring. Last but not least, my favorite step of the way, and this is empower myself with my words, be less stigmatizing about how I'm talking about thoughts and feelings and actions, using the word mental health as something positive as opposed to something that people should be afraid of, empower people with my support, with my leadership, empower people to make change, be positive role models, empower myself with the knowledge around my own mental health and how I have an effect on others, Empower myself to know what protective factors are. And these are just these great things. Rachel touched on these along with Joanne. Empower to know protective factors. Do people have access to services? Are they utilizing services? Being involved in activities, in groups outside of school. This is one of the biggest protective factors for kids, to be connected. And this is where I see our church being one of the biggest protective pieces. Knowing that every Sunday I have my religious ed teacher that I can go to. She's consistent, he's consistent, they're always there. My priest is always there for me. There is nothing more protective than our church and having a greater understanding about our role. Having supportive family members, this includes our nunas, our nunos, our yayas, our papus, everybody in our church is so supportive. Having and keeping strong morals, again, how can't you get more about the church on that? School connectivity, group connectivity, positive role models, faith, positive attitude, optimism, maintaining good boundaries, and coping skills, what helps. I'm going to go back to the faith. I challenge everybody to take a look, and I know y'all read the Bible, but I find some of my most inspirational quotes in the Bible to help me in my protective factors about where people were struggling with anxiety, where was their depression, and plastering my Sunday school room with those quotes. Empower, let's step up. Does my priest have the resources to refer to? Okay, so we're doing tons of mental health education right now in churches. I hope that our Orthodox Church embraces some of these concepts and ideas to get more awareness and provide our priests, our lay people, everybody with more information about mental health. Do my youth advisors, dance instructors, religious ed instructors have knowledge base surrounding mental health? Do we understand that GOYA is a protective factor for mental health? This could be the only social connectivity that the young person has as a protective factor. Empower, strong protective factors can lead to high self-esteem, assertiveness skills, social skills, cooperation skills. That's a dream come true for a perfect world. And these three things build on it. Do they have a friend? Is this the one friend that they come to church to and they can see every Sunday? Is there an internal locus of control? So every week, can I make sure that I invite that person to come to church every Sunday so I can see them there? Listen, when you come to altar, it makes a difference for me. Will you be there every Sunday? Because I'm counting on you. For the Greek dance troupe, I need you every Sunday. I need you whenever we're practicing. In religious ed, can I leave a child with the whole concept that when you come, you're such a contributor and I need you to be here every week? And telling a trusted adult. It is important for children of all ages to tell an adult about how they are feeling. You can take the pledge online, and if you go to benice.org, you can gain more information. But quick blurb about a young man who was in my youth group in GOYA, and it was when I had just started, so I'm going to say that was probably about 28 years ago. And I just recently heard back from him. He had lost a friend to suicide recently as an adult, and we were private messaging, and I did not know that his real mother, his biological mom, had died by suicide. And when he was in GOYA, he was always on the edge, always on the fringe. I knew that his parents were making him come to GOYA, but for some reason, he really caught my attention. So I did. I was that friend. I was that adult in his life, and I did have him with the message that whenever he left, it was really important that he came back. And just recently, he did reach out to me, and he thanked me for really saving his life when he was in high school, because he did contemplate taking his life. So I hear these stories, but I think we need to make more of an effort so we don't ever, ever lose a child to suicide, nor do we ever have someone who commits a crime such as homicide in a school. So thank you very much for listening.